If you've been diagnosed with Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, you know the exhausting reality. You're managing antihistamines, you're carrying epinephrine everywhere, and you're avoiding the endless triggers that seem to change without warning. There's flushing, hives, your GI system's wrecked, heart is racing, brain fog, and none of it really fits together. What makes it even more frustrating is that your doctors tell you it's idiopathic, which is basically just terminology for we don't know why this is happening. There's symptom management, but no one is asking the bigger question. Why did the mast cells become hypersensitive in the first place? This goes hand in hand with POTS, Ehlers-Danlos, fibromyalgia, and this whole world of confusing disorders because there's some underlying neurological connection between all of them. If you're sick of just managing the symptoms or relying on medications to do that, and you want to get to the actual underlying neurological cause, tune in for this video because that's what we want to walk through. Let's start with just the mast cell side of it because they really are all so related. Mast cells are one of your immune system's first responders. So they are what kick in when there is something detective. They release histamines. And what's happening with Mast Cell Activation Syndrome is that they are oversensitized. Their threshold is too low, meaning it takes way too low of a trigger for them to have that response where there's this big histamine reaction that has all of those symptoms that you're experiencing or we just read off. What we're not talking about though is that the immune system, those mast cells, are regulated by something. Your immune system is controlled through the nervous system, specifically the autonomic nervous system, and the majority of that ANS is the vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is the calming or the parasympathetic mediating branch of your autonomic nervous system. So what's going on with something like mast cell activation syndrome is that is too downregulated, and the sympathetic, or what we will refer to as the gas pedal side of your nervous system, is way too ramped up. So we have this gas pedal out of control, brake pedal shut down, and that huge imbalance is going to lead to this. It's almost like this experience where your gas pedal is to the floor, but your parking brake has gone on. Your whole system is dysregulated, and that is going to trigger this sensitivity. So then we have the mast cells are interpreting something that's a normal stimulation, right? Your nervous system and your mast cells are taking something in that isn't a big red flag, a big invader, but having that huge response to it. It's making a threat out of nothing, right? That's oversimplifying what's going on here. But what we want to understand, so that's what's happening. What we got to understand is where is it coming from? And this, guys, there is so much research and studies behind this, right? I actually have one of the papers that is a big part of that, relating mast cells and the autonomic nervous system. We can get into all of the weeds and the details of that if you want, but I want to go overview and superficial with you, because this is something that is taking place not out of nowhere. It seems like the end result or that final tipping point starts out of nowhere, but it's been building for usually years up until that point. So what is going on? There is a perfect storm of stress that females are often going through. And this, it happens in males as well, but it's 3 or 4 times as likely in females. So we're going to really focus on that. There's an onslaught of the 3 T's that females are often doing with. We call those thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So physical, chemical, emotional stresses. Those 3 T's are majorly ramped up in young females. Let's start with just the chemical ones. There are so many endocrine disruptors going on. There's plastics everywhere. There's artificial fragments in cosmetics. There's the glyphosate, the pesticide residues, mold, ultra processed food. We could go on and on with those. But then females have the extra dose of birth control for way too many of our young ladies, SSRIs, there's maybe acne medications, antibiotics, and steroids that way too many of our kids are exposed to. Those are happening at an early phase of life. So we have this onslaught of chemical stresses. There's major physical and kind of structural hormonal ones as well. Cycles create that stress, pregnancy and postpartum depletion, low sleep that is just an inevitable part of motherhood, it seems like. But then there's also the under-eating, the posture, the physical tone that you'll see so many of our females end up with too. That is all a barrage of a physical stress on their system. And then we get to the emotional one. That thought or emotional piece is really, really weighty too. There's academic pressures, there's social media and body image issues. There could be relationship trauma, financial stresses. Moms carry such a huge mental load. All of this accumulates to mean cortisol is rising, your vagus nerve is turning off, that brake pedal is turning off, and now we have this sympathetic fight or flight stress response that's just out of control. Your mast cells are ramped up. What does that lead to? There's 3 stages in this MCAS, that Mast Cell Activation Syndrome process. First is just accumulation. That is the accumulation of stress. These 3 T's pile up over years. For some people, there is a single trigger. There is a big event, a massive stressor that sets it all off. But even in those cases, a lot of times there's a smaller, more minor building over the years. So we have that accumulation of stress. Everything looks normal, labs look okay, but their PMS is getting worse. Migraines, anxiety, bloating, fatigue, all of that becomes standard. So we have that accumulation build up, and then it starts turning into dysregulation. The nervous system shifts into that sympathetic fight or flight gas pedal mode, and your hormones are weird, your cycle gets worse, autoimmune markers start showing up on labs, and you start to see those being off. Maybe the POTS diagnosis happens at that point where we're getting dizzy more frequently, or food is bothering you. You're definitely dealing with some of the brain fog. Your mental state isn't really all there. You have all that going on behind the scenes, and then we hit the hyperreactivity. That's when the MCAS emerges. You get that diagnosis where your mast cells start reacting to everything. Maybe it's temperature changes. Maybe it's foods that used to be previously fine that are a big deal now, or any sort of stress, smell, sometimes even supplements, all are triggering this massive response. It looks like everything is a trigger, but what is really happening is that there's this underlying dysregulation and neurological stress that had been building for years. And that's why it goes so frequently with stuff like Ehlers-Danlos, POTS, fibromyalgia, other dysautonomia diagnoses, because there's the same underlying common thread. And unfortunately, for most of those, medicine treats them the same way, meaning we're just going to medicate the symptoms away, right? We're going to maybe treat the histamine or the hormone or the anxiety or the inflammation without addressing the nervous system, without addressing that operating system or the root underlying level of it. We got to get to that foundation. Otherwise, you can't really build on it. You can't hit those higher levels when you're still stuck with that symptomatic approach. So what do we need to do differently? Stop getting into that framework. First off, stop focusing on the symptoms, but backtracking a few steps, right? Realizing that if your parking brake is stuck on, slamming the pedal to the floor doesn't help anymore. You gotta restore the brakes. You gotta restore that balance between the system. You can't try to medicate your way through it and force it through. You gotta help the inside out healing take place. This is a neurological problem, so it takes a neurological intervention. And that's why a huge part of what I would recommend is the insight scans. Doing an evaluation of your nervous system. Not do you have a brain tumor or not, but are you stuck in fight or flight or not? How are you regulating stress? How is your neuroimmune axis coordinating? Because if we get that regulating better, everything downstream of that is going to work better too. That's why those scans are a huge part of what we do at care at step 1 when a new patient comes in to Thrive. And then as we go throughout care, we're doing those scan check-ins along the way to make sure we're on the right track, to make sure that we're seeing progress and seeing things head in the right direction. So guys, if you are stuck, if you feel like you've tried everything else, if everything seems normal when you know it's anything but normal, don't skip the nervous system. Get your nervous system checked and let's start healing that. That is what neurologically focused chiropractic is all about. That's what we would love to help you with. And man, we just can't wait to see you soon, okay? Reach out if you have questions. Reach out if you have specific concerns that you feel like this video sparked. I'd love to dig into it more. I'd love to have our team help answer some of those questions too. And we just can't wait to meet you soon and help your family thrive.